I woke up to the sound of my name being whispered through the wall. Not a shout, not a call, just a low, raspy murmur, like someone was pressing their lips to the plaster and breathing Elliot into the seams. My eyes snapped open, heart already hammering in my chest, the kind of raw panic you feel when you know you're not alone, but you should be. It was 3:14 a.m., and the apartment was dead silent except for that voice slithering from the sealed-off room next door. I'm Elliot Carter, 26, a graphic designer who moved to Brooklyn in the summer of 2025, chasing a fresh start after a rough breakup. New York was supposed to be my reset button, new job, new vibe, new me. I found this apartment on a sketchy rental app, a steal for the city, a one-bedroom in a pre-war brownstone on Degraw Street, with high ceilings, creaky hardwood floors, and a weird quirk boarded-up door in the living room that led to nowhere. The landlord, a weary guy named Sal with nicotine-stained fingers, said it was just a storage closet sealed off decades ago. Old buildings, you know, he'd muttered, avoiding my eyes. I didn't think much of it. The rent was $1,800 a month. In Brooklyn, I signed the lease without a second thought. The first few weeks were fine. The apartment had charm-exposed brick, a clawfoot tub, windows that rattled in the wind. I'd come home from my freelance gigs, blast lo-fi beats, and sketch logos on my tablet. But then the noises started. Soft at first, like a neighbor shifting furniture, except I was on the top floor, and the unit next to mine was vacant. The sounds came from behind that boarded-up door, a faint tapping, like knuckles on wood, or a muffled thump, like something heavy being dragged. I'd press my ear to the wall, holding my breath, but it had stopped the second I got close. I told myself it was pipes, or rats, or my imagination running wild after too many late-night horror streams on YouTube. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That whisper, though my name, spoken in that guttural hiss, was what broke me. I sat up in bed, sheets tangled around my legs, staring at the wall separating my bedroom from the living room. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on my chest. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating the peeling paint and the faint outline of that sealed door in the next room. I didn't want to move, but I couldn't stay still. I had to know. I crept into the living room, the floorboards groaning under my bare feet. The air was colder here, unnaturally so, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. My breath fogged in front of me, which made no sense. It was August, and the AC was off. The boarded-up door loomed ahead, its edges jagged where the nails had been hammered and crooked. The whispering had stopped, but now there was something else, a faint scratching, like fingernails clawing at the wood from the other side. My stomach twisted, a sour knot of dread. I wanted to run, to grab my keys and bolt, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I raised my phone, the flashlight shaking in my grip, and that's when I saw it. A shadow, tall and thin, flickering across the wall. Not my shadow, something else, something that moved when I didn't. I stumbled back, my heel catching on the edge of the rug, and fell hard. The phone skittered across the floor, its light spinning wildly, casting warped shapes on the ceiling. The scratching stopped, silence. Then a single, deliberate knock-thud. My heart stopped. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the phone, and ran to my bedroom, slamming the door shut. I didn't sleep that night. I sat against the headboard, clutching a kitchen knife, listening for sounds that never came. The next morning, I called Sal. "There's something wrong with this place," I said, my voice hoarse. I told him about the noises, the shadow, the whisper. He laughed, a dry, nervous chuckle. "Old buildings creak, kid. You're hearing things." But when I pressed him about the sealed room, he got quiet. "Don't mess with that door," he said finally. "It's been closed off since the 40s. Just leave it be." He hung up before I could ask more. I couldn't let it go. I'm not brave. Not really. I'm the guy who jumps at jump scares in movies, but I'm stubborn. I needed answers. That afternoon, I went to the Brooklyn Public Library, digging through old records on the apartment building. It wasn't hard to find. The brownstone at 237 Degraw Street had a history. Built in 1892, it had been a boarding house for dock workers, then a tenement for immigrant families. In 1947, something happened. A woman named Margaret Hensley, 29, vanished from her apartment, my apartment. The articles were vague, but the details chilled me. She'd lived alone, kept to herself, but neighbors reported hearing screams one night, followed by silence. The police found no body, no signs of a struggle, just an empty apartment with a half-eaten meal on the table. The case went cold. The room next to hers, my sealed room, was boarded up shortly after. No explanation why. I sat in the library, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, my hands clammy as I scrolled through microfiche. There was a grainy photo of Margaret, her face pale and serious, her dark hair pinned up in a 1940s style. Her eyes seemed to stare right through me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen her before, though I knew I hadn't. My phone buzzed a text from my friend Mia, asking if I was still up for drinks. I typed back a shaky "not tonight" and kept digging. That's when I found it. A small article from 1948, buried in a local paper. A tenant who'd lived in the building after Margaret's disappearance claimed they heard knocking from the sealed room. They'd moved out within a month. Another article, from 1955, mentioned a family who fled after their kids saw a lady in the wall watching them sleep. My throat went dry. I wasn't the first. Back at the apartment, I couldn't stop staring at the door. The knocking had started again, faint but insistent, like someone was testing if I was listening. I tried to ignore it, blasting music through my headphones, but it was like the sound was inside my skull. That night, I set up my phone to record audio while I slept, hoping to catch something or prove I was losing it. At 3:14 a.m., I woke up to the same whisper, "Elliot." My skin crawled. I checked the recording. There it was, clear as day. My name hissed in a voice that wasn't human to low, to hollow, like it was coming from underwater. I didn't sleep after that. I started noticing other things. My keys would be on the counter when I swore I'd left them by the door. My sketchbook, always on the coffee table, ended up open on the floor, pages filled with rough, frantic lines I didn't draw, jagged shapes, like someone had tried to claw their way out of the paper. The air in the apartment grew heavier each day, the kind of oppressive weight that makes your chest ache. I'd catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, a flicker of a shadow, a blur of something pale, but when I turned, nothing was there. I told Mia everything. She's a skeptic, always rolling her eyes at my ghost story obsessions, but even she looked spooked when I played her the recording. "You need to get out of there," she said, her voice sharp, like yesterday. But I couldn't. My lease was ironclad, and I didn't have the cash to break it. Besides, part of me, the stubborn, stupid part, wanted to know what was happening. I started researching paranormal forums, diving into threads about hauntings in Brooklyn. One user, but Ghost Hunter, mentioned 137 Degraw Street specifically. They claimed the building was built over an old well, sealed up in the early 1900s after a worker drowned during construction. No proof, just rumors, but it was enough to make my skin prickle. A week later, I bought a crowbar. I don't know what possessed me, maybe the sleepless nights, maybe the whispers that now came every night, always at 3:14. I stood in front of the boarded-up door, the crowbar heavy in my hands. My pulse was racing, a dull roar in my ears. I didn't want to do this, but I had to. I wedged the crowbar under the first board and pulled. The wood splintered with a crack that echoed through the apartment. Dust poured out, stinging my eyes. The air beyond the door was stale, thick with the smell of mildew and something sharper, like rust or blood. I tore down the rest of the boards, revealing a plain wooden door, its paint chipped and yellowed. The knob was cold to the touch, almost burning with how icy it was. I turned it, expecting resistance, but it swung open easily, revealing a small, windowless room. The walls were bare plaster, stained with dark, uneven patches. In the center of the floor was a trapdoor, rusted shut, with scratches around the edges, like someone had tried to pry it open. My flashlight beam danced across the room, catching on something in the corner, a small, tarnished locket, half buried in the dust. I picked it up, my hands trembling. Inside was a faded photo of a woman, Margaret Hensley. My heart sank. The locket felt heavier than it should, like it was pulling me toward the trapdoor. That's when I heard it, a low, keening wail, rising from the floorboards. Not from the trapdoor, but from the walls, the ceiling, everywhere. The room seemed to pulse, the air vibrating with a sound I could feel in my bones. I dropped the locket and ran, slamming the door behind me. The wailing stopped, but the knocking started again, louder, faster, like a fist pounding for release. I called a priest the next day. I'm not religious, but I was desperate. Father Daniel, a soft-spoken guy from a local parish, came over that evening. He didn't laugh when I told him the story, just nodded, his face grim. He blessed the apartment, sprinkling holy water and murmuring prayers. But when he reached the sealed room now unsealed, he froze. "There's something here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something angry." He refused to go inside, just handed me a rosary and told me to leave. "This isn't a place for the living," he said, his eyes wide with something like fear. I didn't leave. I couldn't. Instead, I kept digging. I found a retired cop, Frank Russo, who'd worked the precinct in the 80s. Over coffee at a diner, he told me about Margaret. She wasn't just missing, he said, his voice low. The landlord back then, guy named Vincent Moretti, was questioned. Shady type, ran some gambling rackets. Rumor was he'd been obsessed with Margaret, wouldn't leave her alone. When she vanished, folks thought he'd done something, but there was no proof. They sealed up that room right after, said it was for renovations. Frank leaned closer, his eyes hard. "That trapdoor leads to an old well. They filled it in after the war, but it's still there, under the building." The pieces clicked. Vincent, the landlord, had been in love with Margaret or obsessed. When she rejected him, he killed her, hid her body in the well, and sealed the room to cover it up. The locket was hers, a tether keeping her spirit trapped. The knocking, the whispers, the shadows, they were Margaret, screaming for justice. I went back to the apartment one last time. I had to end it. Armed with the locket and a sledgehammer I'd borrowed from a neighbor, I broke open the trapdoor. The rusted metal gave way, revealing a black, yawning hole. The smell hit me first, damp earth, decay, and that same sharp, metallic tang. I tied a rope to the radiator, lowered myself down. The well was shallow, maybe 10 feet, its walls slick with moss. At the bottom, my flashlight caught on something white as skull, half buried in the mud, alongside fragments of bone and a tattered dress. "Margaret." I climbed out, my hands shaking so bad I could barely grip the rope. I placed the locket on the floor, whispered an apology, and smashed it with the sledgehammer. The air shifted, like a pressure valve releasing. The knocking stopped. The apartment felt lighter. I called the police, told them about the bones. They came, cordoned off the building, and found her remains. The case was reopened, Vincent long dead, but his crime finally exposed. I moved out the next day. The new place is a showbox in Queens, overpriced and bland. But it's quiet, no whispers, no shadows. Still, I can't shake the feeling that Margaret's with me, sometimes a cold spot in the air. A faint tug at the edge of my thoughts. I keep her story alive, telling it here for you all. If you've ever lived somewhere that felt wrong, or heard something you couldn't explain, drop it in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone.